Good morning to everyone. On behalf of the SEA2SEE Consortium, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the final conference of the SEA2SEE project, Building Trust and Transparency in Europe's Seafood Future. We are delighted to welcome participants joining us here at the University of Algarve in person and also our online attendees. Today marks an important milestone, not only for SEA2SEE as a project, but also for the ongoing conversation around sustainable seafood practices, digital innovation, and consumer trust. Over the course of the day, we will explore how technology, policy, industry collaboration, and storytelling can come together to create more transparent and resilient seafood value chains. We will hear from experts across science, policy, industry, and EU initiatives, while also showcasing the practical experiences emerging from SEA2SEE pilot cases and blockchain-based traceability platform. So a few practical things before we begin. Our lunch break is from 12:30 to 2 o'clock local time, which for our online participants, they need to add 1 hour to become Central European time. Coffee break is scheduled for 3:15, 3:45. And to our online participants, please feel free to post your questions or comments in the chat, and we will address them as we go during the sessions. Today, we are also pleased to have Danielle Perdigao, who will be our graphic note taker. So this is some novel way of taking notes for important conferences like ours. And to begin our morning, I would like now to invite Professor Alexandra Teodósio. She is the Rector of the University of Algarve, for some opening remarks. Please.
So good morning, all. It's a true pleasure for me to welcome you to the University of Algarve, and of course also to CCMAR, that it's also my research house. I would like to give a special compliment to Carlos Mazorra, the coordinator of the project, and also to the colleagues that are organizing and receiving the colleagues here. The theme of your project, it's already in our the DNA of the University of Algarve, and also in the CCMAR, and more than the research. The University of Algarve, it's also committed to change also the way that we offer food in our campus. We are committed to follow the the planetary health diet, where a more vegetable-based food, and also the blue-based food are the real added value for the health of the planet and for our own health, and to preserve not only the biodiversity of the sea, but also the biodiversity in land. So the track of the carbon footprint in our planet, mainly based, if our feeding habits are based on beef, there is the track of the huge carbon footprint. In fact, around 1/3 of the carbon footprint, it's coming directly or indirectly for this type of feeding habits. So all the issues that are connected with a sustainable seafood capture and processing. It's one of our aims in the University of Algarve, also to continue to contribute to the sustainable development goals in the way and also honor the track that all the colleagues that are doing marine science research in our university has already proved. Usually, I like to introduce our university not based on the world rankings like the World University Rankings of the Times Higher Education, but I like to also to show our results in the sustainability rankings, where our contribution to the Sustainable Development Goal 14, the protection and sustainable exploitation of the seas, is where we performed well above the world average. In fact, more than 14 times higher than the world average in our contribution to these sustainable development goals, and indirectly also to the climate action, and also to the sustainable food consumption and production. So it was just a quick introduction. I wish you all the best in your final events, and I will still stay for a while, but then I need to go. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you very much, Professor. I would like now to give the floor to Carlos Mazorra, who is the coordinator of SEA2SEE projects, who will continue setting the scene before we transition to our next item on the agenda.
Thank you, Annie. Thank you, Alexandra. Thanks for having us here in fantastic Faro, which is a place I've been to many times, and I absolutely love it. Each one of them. So, SEA2SEE, final event. Don't get me wrong, I like chicken. I love it, and it's the main source of protein for a lot of people and a lot of countries, and you can cook it, and it's great. But seafood, because chicken is chicken, but seafood, for millennia, seafood has been uniting us. It has served as an excuse for communication, trading, knowledge, tradition, pickling, cooking, shearing, basting, everywhere in the world. From fishing communities in Saint Miquelon in Newfoundland to fishing communities in Vigo. From the Orkneys and Bordeaux to Marseille, from Faro to Patras. It's communicated fishing communities, real people living in their houses, going out to fish, connecting with other people far away, coming back home, and telling everybody their stories. Stories of trading, stories of competence, histories of competition as well, but histories of people and communication of people. Then came trading and marketing and big operations and big trades and big retail, and we had to organize everything. And that's what the Commission has been doing for a number of years, obviously, for a number of decades. And finally, we've got to digitalization of traceability. And with that, the Commission has made an effort of backing up a series of projects to look at solutions for digital tools to facilitate that. And C2C has been one of them. And we're going to hear about C2C, and we're going to hear about other projects that have been dealing with this in the last few years. So hopefully we're going to learn more about how we communicate with each other, how we bring back messages from distant places home, and we talk about it around the plate, hopefully with some food, hopefully with some seafood in our plates, and with some original recipe from our grandparents or from the grandparents of distant fishing communities. And I don't want to forget the domestication. We are being witness to this process of domestication after so many millennia of having chicken, having cows, having pigs. We are now living the experience of domesticating seafood, that final frontier. And it's been a great adventure. And yes, chicken is chicken is chicken. We have 750 species, different species of seafood being domesticated at the moment around the world. And there is a myriad of seafood being captured and put on our tables. Let's contribute to that, to build trust, transparency in Europe's seafood future and in the world's seafood during these days. So I thank you all. I hope we have a nice program for all you here and through the video conference. And I leave you with the first keynote and with Annie as Master of Ceremonies. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Carlos. We can conclude that transparency in the seafood sector is not just a technological challenge, it's also environmental, it's also a societal one, and it's connected to sustainability, to good governance, to market confidence, and ultimately public trust. So let's continue now with our keynote speaker. We're pleased to have here Dr. Stefan Meyer, who is the General Manager of the German Association of Fish Processing and Wholesale. He's also a marine biologist, a recognized expert in food law, fisheries control, sustainability, seafood markets, and EU regulation. And his keynote is on the topic of seafood traceability is the basis for trust and better management from fisheries to market. So Stefan, please. The floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Anna, and thanks a lot, Carlos, for inviting me to be here today. Good morning still to everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here today and to talk as a keynote on this topic. And Carlos, in his introductory speech, was already opening quite a lot of venues I try to pick up on one, and that would be indeed an emotional access to loving seafood. And love and trust, in my opinion, go hand in hand. That's why it's a fundamental understanding also for me when the time I was able to join the project, but also in my work. I'm doing this work here now for a little bit more than 2.5 years now, is to bring a good and profound basis of trust into every little aspect of our seafood sector. And traceability is certainly one of the better instruments to support this, because trust is something that you have to gain, that you have to work for. And yeah, I think this is well invested time and money to think about, especially for us as an industry, to continue improving and continue growing on this ambition. I would like to maybe use the microphone.
This one is working.
Yeah, I would like to keep a little moving.
Okay. So
is it possible to switch to a microphone? Maybe?
You can switch it on.
Test. Yeah, that sounds very good. Thanks a lot. So what I would like to do is in the next couple of minutes, it's a keynote, so I have the flexibility to give you a little bit more of a bigger picture overview of what hopefully will come also in place during the day today. And I'm going to be talking a little bit first about where we stand in seafood supply in Europe. The figures are pretty much the same for the last couple of years, and they basically show a picture of where, yes, indeed, Europe is a very important seafood producing region. So we do have a lot of fisheries, we do have a lot of aquaculture, but we are also very and heavily, one would say, dependent, but we are also actively working with imports, I would like to put it this way. So around 8.7 million tons of imports versus around 4 million tons of EU domestic production. And on the same hand, and that's the other side of the slide, is we are also quite good in exporting seafood to other places in the world. And that just shows where we stand within Europe. We are not only good in consuming, but we are also very good in improving and processing and refining finished products. And there are markets beyond Europe. Okay, probably one would have to say this is not EU 27 without the UK. There's also, and apparently, countries like Norway and the other non-European countries around the corner are very important seafood nations in both ways. We do have a very strong interaction, and Europe is deeply connected into a global supply chains of seafood imports and exports. That's what I would like to convey. And please bear that in mind. For the next minutes, I would like to talk as well about us in a globalized context. For whatever we do here in Europe, it has to fit to a globalized context as well of seafood trade. I'm going to deep dive quickly just into Germany. Maybe if anyone of you ever had the chance to go seafood dining in Germany, maybe not so very much of an exciting experience it was. In any case, I'm personally from a region in the western part of Germany near the city of Cologne. I grew up with trout and mussels, and this was it. And still, apparently, brain functionality did also work out to some extent. And I'm still learning, and we, I think, as Germans, are also still learning to increase our seafood consumption patterns and habits. And still, we have habits. Germany has been quite stable in terms of per capita consumption, so that's more or less up and down for the last 60 to 70 years, post-World War II. Not much has changed. Indeed, what has been changing were a few highlights during the Corona crisis. Also, German people were into some kind of lockdown. We didn't have so intense lockdowns as you did have here in Portugal. I remember that from those days. But we did have certainly a huge shift in the way people were consuming and also accepting to prepare fresh food. And I think this is the main difference if you want to compare Portugal to the German seafood eating habits. We Germans, we are a little bit afraid of fresh fish and whole fish. And that was exactly the time during the Corona crisis where people had a little bit more available household income because they couldn't go on holidays, and where they would be able to shop fresh fish for the first time maybe ever in their lives. And we could definitely see this in the statistics that consumption were going up to some extent there. So, and still, one has to say, German seafood market is a little bit flat in terms of diversity. Most consumed species are salmon and Alaska pollock, directly followed by tuna and bonitos, and that's mostly canned bonito, that's Catsamomus pelamis, compared to what you are used to eating when you're ordering a fresh salad with some tuna topping on it. You would be eating one of the other tuna species, or the actual tuna species. We eat Catsamomus pelamis, bonito, and we're still strong in herring and shrimp. And that is also now this slide important. I would like to just convey that fishmongers is not a thing anymore in Germany. Maybe only 4% of fish is actually being sold from a direct specialized shop. And this is nothing compared to any supermarket, apparently, that you're going to here in Portugal or in Spain or even Italy and France, where you would have a huge variety of fresh fish, even in a big hypermarché. We don't have that in Germany at all. What we do have is 90% of fish being sold in regular discounters and supermarkets. I'm not trying to judge this. I'm just explaining with this. This is the way we buy seafood, and this is also the way we are used to be presented the seafood that we eat. This is going to be important in the later part of my presentation, because I'm going to work a little bit with the theory, who's driving traceability and who's in charge of providing systems and solutions, depending on the point of sale, apparently. So where do we stand today with traceability in seafood and maybe in other domains as well? Let me start from a different perspective, and I find this quite helpful for anyone of you who has been working in the industry and who's been had the pleasure to also see some other maybe legal areas, especially the ones I want to say, especially legal areas where the European countries are very strong, where also the European system, so the introduction of the European regulatory frameworks and also EU regulations have been creating a level playing field and have been creating a very strong system for food safety. And food in the EU is safe. I want to say this, or just put this out as a hypothesis. Every food business operator, FBOs, food business operators, are responsible for this. That's in the basis documentation. An FBO is responsible for what he or she is doing with the produce they are buying and selling. And responsibility is a very important aspect in here for food safety. The second one is it applies to every stage, irrespective of imports or domestically produced, irrespective of if you're a very, very small manufacturer producer or if you're a big industrial factory, it doesn't matter. At every stage from producing and from the origin to the final moment that somebody wants to eat it, it is covered by our food safety schemes. And something recently, and I like the term, because that was also introduced by an EU regulation, companies have to, or companies should be living a food safety culture. Food safety culture, for example, means that's something that I learn every time when I'm visiting one of my industrial company members. When you go into a big food factory and staff members are working there, don't put your fingers in the food. Don't eat chewing gum and throw the paper on the ground. Don't leave the warehouse doors open because vermin, a rat or something might be coming in, and so on and so forth. It's something you can, of course, put out rules, and you can, of course, put out procedures that are forcing people to obey to safety standards and to safety requirements. But what comes after obedience and after sticking to the rules is when you live a culture of accepting and understanding, why am I doing this? Why do I have to follow these procedures? And that's the concept of food safety culture. And what I would like to just to ponder on maybe for a second and give that on for later on discussion is, why don't we have that same thing for sustainability? And would that also be applicable in the way when we would say, is our food just as sustainable as it's safe in Europe? There's a few aspects on this that are quite interesting to follow up on if you want to think about this a bit. So, but when we are, especially, maybe that's a special thing in Europe, it does look certainly different when you go to the US because they have a different approach to controls, but it certainly does apply to the European way of doing things. When we have a rule on something, we need to have a control system for it as well. And the food safety control system, there's a whole regulation on this, the 625 from 2017. For example, foresees, apparently, 27 EU countries, uniform standards for food monitoring, for food controls throughout Europe. So because when it's 27 countries in the European Union, it does make, of course, sense if every country sticks to the same standards and if it's done in the same way in every of these countries. A second very important aspect of food control systems as well for safety, to have in principle a risk-based approach, because controls, you cannot do controls on a full scale with the regular approaches that we see. It's like with traffic controls. You have to go to places and you have to go to where the risk is highest, that people are not adhering to the rules, or where the negative impact of misconduct is the greatest. And that's where you would then focus on your control activities. And then the what do you do when things go really pear-shaped, when something's really going wrong? Then you start thinking about crisis management, emergency plans. And this is something that's also been introduced with the food safety regulations. For example, the introduction of the concept of hazard analysis, critical control planes, HACCP concepts, has been a very important step forward, because when you realize something is not working, you have to get active on this. And again, the question, what would such a system for sustainability look like? So I'm just going to cite quickly a few EU regulations, and that's certainly not conclusive, this listing here. But it's important, especially when you think about also fast forward implementing new technologies and also a new approach to traceability here. How do these fit into currently existing regulatory frameworks of the European Union? And I would just like to highlight two regulations here. The one would apparently be the EU Fisheries Control Regulation, the 1224. That's been kicking off big time with traceability requirements from 10th of January this year onwards, and the EU regulation, the 105 from 2008, which is the main piece of legislation that is describing and formulating how imported fisheries, wild capture fisheries products from third countries should be revealing themselves. I would like to put this way, how they should be explaining about where they come from and how they have been fished. The Fisheries Control Regulation is, it's been updated. It used to be called different ways back in the days, and then it was hanging around since 2009 like this, and it was really mostly interesting for everyone who's been fishing, actively fishing as a European fisherman or fisherwoman, and that's been changed. And the new version that was introduced in 2024, for example, now covers all fisheries and aquaculture products. So for the first time ever in this legal domain, it's not only capture fisheries products, but it's also aquaculture products. And as Carlos was saying, of course it's aquaculture in there, because aquaculture is a very importantly growing part of seafood supply, not only in Europe, but internationally, globally as well. And therefore, in the end of the day, if I may say so, just for a second, for the consumer, in the end of the day, it doesn't matter so very much at all if the fish is coming from the sea or from freshwater. I'm going to go into this in the later part of my presentation for a bit when we talk about consumer expectation. But the produce itself, if it's a fish, it's a fish, it's a fish, and the fish should be covered by the Fisheries Control Regulation. That's basically the rationale here. It's now also fully applicable for third country imports and without prejudice to anything here. And that's also been creating a lot of turmoil in the sector, because it, of course, does change quite a bit the way you are buying products. When back in the days, you could just simply ask from your supplier, make sure that the produce is fine and free for market access for the European Union. And now it's a lot more strings attached to this to collect information and data. The principle is here to have traceability from catch or harvest at all stages up to delivery to the end consumer. So until the final moment at the retail stage, to have one continuous chain of traceability here. And in this chain, controls are possible at any time in the EU. And that's also, that's a little bit of a new concept here. I'm just introducing this here because we are probably going to hear a lot more about key data elements and tracking events. This is the most simplistic approach that the European Commission could come up with. And that's the minimal lot information, Article 58.5 of the control regulation. That's the kind of data points that a European fish needs to carry. And that's probably quite plain, straightforward what information is given here. So this is in itself, as it's written here, neither, let's say, super spectacular, nor is it super confidential, but every single one of these data elements has its own point in there, because it does change the way the supply chains are working and the way trade has been working in the past. And that's why, even though it doesn't look so spectacular, this particular list of minimum traceability elements or minimum lot information elements has been also creating quite some headache for the sector in the last weeks and months. So I already used, because that was a quote from this Article 58.5, the word lot. So traceability of lots is a thing now. Apparently, lot information must be passed on in the supply chain. We did have the concept of a lot before, even before the previous regulation that has been dismissed actually in spring this year. Previously, a lot was mostly in this context something a fisherman would decide on. A fisherman decides how many fish would he or she be doing in a box, and how do they selling this off to an auction, for example, or some kind of first sales or first introduction to the market. And then from there on, in the previous legislation, the concept of a lot was a lot more introduced into the how to trade and how to form batches of produce, the way you're doing your trade and your production procedures. That's been changed as well, and that's introducing some trouble here. In principle, it means a lot might be a box of fish, or it might be one haul of fish that's been captured, and then afterwards you do all kinds of splitting, mixing and merging of lots, because you're sorting, for example. That's something that I also learned during a C2C event. When you have octopus from the Algarve, you have different sizes of octopus in there, and you certainly do not want to, well, you have to separate them, for example, by size. And that's an initial lot of octopus that you have to split into different size classes, and then you merge different catches from different fishermen into a specific new lot by size. And in the end of the day, this is creating a lot of turmoil and technical challenges for creating and maintaining this lot information. In any case, it's a thing now. It's since 10th of January 26. It applies to unprocessed products, Chapter 03, and from 2029 onwards, it will also be applied to processed products. I said that controls can happen any time and at any stage of the supply chain, and that's something that sounds nice in theory. We're still waiting to see how that actually will come into place. It's beginning of June now, so we have a good 5 months or so of the new regulation being in place. The principle would be here, apparently, like many EU member states do already have had in place before, because they had capture fisheries, is controls in harbors at the moment, at the point of landing, maybe even controls at sea. The typical fisheries control would be inspection taking place on board of a vessel. You're measuring the mesh sizes of the fishing gear, for example, of the trawl nets, and you would be checking how much fish is in the bow of the ship and how is this marketing. But it goes on to every stage here, and especially this latter part of the supply chain here is increasingly becoming very difficult, because imagine that you are somebody who's have to do the control thing on the level of gastronomy, basically going to a restaurant and asking the chef in the kitchen, okay, tell me where your fish comes from and tell me everything about this Article 58.5 lot information. That's new. I'm not saying that's impossible. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying this is new, and this is mostly from a B2B perspective, it's an obligation, because that's what's written in the legal text. You have to deliver the information to your customer. There's no arguing about that. But the question is, what does that cause, or what is the effect and the impact it has on the actual chef there, and what's his or her benefit to this, to say, okay, yeah, I know where I buy my fish and I know why I buy my fish. Who are you to come now to ask me what is the name of the vessel and the vessel master signature standing behind this? So just a little bit controversy here when it's really about the controls on the different levels. My point here would be, yes, the controls are demanded and they will take place, but it's mostly a question of not interfering with the businesses, and also not to come up with a system that makes it actually fair and possible, especially for the later stages of supply chain, to use the information and to provide the information in a meaningful way without causing too much disturbance. So just a short list, something that's maybe often forgotten, and I had to repeat this quite a lot of time when I was talking with national stakeholders also back in Germany. The full traceability requirements also, for example, applies to live fish. So everybody who's selling, for example, live fish for stocking a river, or to sell to an angling club, they also have to do this. And it also applies to some of them are derived products. And what's something that's been causing quite a lot of uproar in Germany, because we are strong in smoked fish, is that also from January this year onwards, smoked fish, smoking is typically by EU food regulations considered a processing procedure, but still historically, and I'm talking really historically, smoked fish has been put into this Chapter 03 of the international customs logics of the harmonized system of the World Customs Organization. it does not belong here, period. No arguing about that. European Commission knew that. They confirmed, yes, doesn't belong here. It's wrong that it's there, but we decided to go with this logic of anything Chapter 03 January this year, anything Chapter 1604, 1605, 2029, even though for this category here, it's super challenging because they are already doing a lot of the processing and intermediary steps that, for example, yeah, Germany is big in fish fingers. Did you know? I've been to a supermarket the other day here in Portugal. Around 70% of your fish fingers in the supermarket are coming from Germany. You're welcome. So for these companies, it's a different piece of cake. And I have an example from for this also with me in my later slides. But there are still a good 2.5 years time for them to catch up. And then actually, did anybody of you ever look into Chapter 1221 seaweed? Yeah, I would be surprised. Nobody did. We'll see how that goes. Yes. Okay, who's affected? Everybody is. That's what I'm trying to say here. We certainly do have a whole areas, domains of stakeholders, professional stakeholders who just said, what the hell happened just here? I had literally people calling me up from other associations said, fish sector, what are you doing? You messed up, leave us alone. That was, for example, people coming from the logistics sector. Freight and warehouse operators said, I don't want to be involved in that. Leave me alone. I don't want to take a responsibility, including all the penalties and the fines that might be associated when they don't have the paperwork right. Or I was already talking about gastronomy sector here. We're still trying to flatten the moods here. It's really, for them, it's a big thing because it's just maybe one perspective here. You're a chef in a regular restaurant. You have 25 dishes on the menu. Maybe 2 or 3 of them are fish. And then he said, for these 3 dishes, I have to do this extra mile of whatever you think I have to do. I have to be to controls. I have to have extra paper trail. And for everything else, I don't have to do anything. That's not right. So fish is off the menu. Thank you. This is it. This is happening already for various reasons, and this is one. And it's also often forgotten, but coming more and more. Also, public authorities are involved in here. And the member states have very different systems in the way they implement controls. So who is actually then doing the control? Who's going out to a harbor, to a fish processing factory, or to a restaurant to make that kind of control? And the way it's done is also very different. And this is typically European level playing fields, general context here, but this is where the music plays. This is really where we're going to be seeing the largest discrepancies in the different European member states. And I'm not so positively looking forward to this perspective. Okay, but we have digital traceability now. Everything digital is better than before. Sorry, that was a quote. I'm not going to say from whom, but it was a quote coming from official circles. It said, no, it's going to be fine because it's digital. We wrote in there it should be digital. You're going to be getting rid of all the old paperwork and all the wrong doings of paperwork. I don't want to go in this too deeply, but for now, for where we stand today, lacking good digital solutions, paper did work a lot better than it is doing now. I have to say this. I'm sorry to say this. But in principle, the idea is, of course, great. Huh? So a lot of information must be made available in a digital way. This is what's written in there within supply chains. And then even as well, for obvious reasons, upon request to competent authorities. And that's actually not completely new, right? One have to say it's fair enough to highlight this. Broadening a little bit the context here, we do have digital traceability requirements in the European Union, for example, for tobacco products, that goes to the level of where every individual single package of cigarettes has a tracking code that an authority can track the single cigarette in the package back to where it comes from. This is huge, right? So the tobacco industry has been working intensely on this. Structural difference, the tobacco industry in Europe, that's maybe 3 or 4 companies that dominate global market. So for them, that was also maybe a little bit of a different approach to how to come up with an industry standard and how to come up with a harmonized system. This is light years away from where we stand in seafood sector, right? And even though point taken, yes, also a competent authority, a control person needs to be able to have access to digital information for traceability. And yes, of course, there needs to be at least these minimum technical this minimum lot information that I was giving in the previous slide, and minimum technical requirements and methods are to be specified in the delegated act. The slide is a little bit older. We've had our little hands-on force with this already. I have another slide on this. Yeah, here it comes. Anybody helping me out? How much time do I actually have? No, I half an hour more. Excellent. Yeah, thank you. Then I hope I don't want to get too lost in too much details. So this is the timeline for the introduction and the implementation of the fisheries control regulation. So here, 10th of January 2024, the fisheries control regulation came into force. Then the next big milestone was here, 10th of January 26. That's a few months ago. Especially Article 56A and 58 on, mostly on traceability and lot formation came into place for Chapter 03 products. And then next big milestone here in January 29 is for the same thing for the process product. I showed you this before. And it was planned, a procedure by the European Commission, the legislator, to keep a very simple text. It's 2 text passages, right, in the fisheries control regulation. It's that much of text in the regulation for the beginning to get going with it, and under let's say the rationale of it's fresh product, it's not processed, it cannot be that difficult, it's quite linear supply chain. So we go with that, and then in the meantime we are doing a feasibility study for the processed product that's ongoing. Consultancy office doing this study has been looking into different realities of canning and processing industry. They've been visiting, for example, sardine canning processors here in Portugal to look how are they doing their thing, how are they merging and splitting and combining lots, for example. And then this feasibility study should have been leading to a consultation where everybody can say, yeah, okay, this is how it could work for processed products. This is how we see that it's technically feasible to provide the minimum information. And then by the end of 27 was a plan to have a delegated act that then says, okay, this is how you have to do it by 2029. That would, in theory, give the industry time, a good year's time to implement whatever it's needed to allow for full traceability of processed products. Yes, and then reality kicked in. So the idea was to have a delegated act coming in fall 2025 that would specify a few things. Okay, who's collecting the information? How long do I need to store the information? Is it allowed to bring the information forward in the supply chain only by written text in a piece of paper in the end of the day? Or am I also allowed to use a 2D code like QR or a GTIN or something like this? There were a few ideas. There were a few articles drafted around. These were deleted just a few days before the delegated act came into effect. And that basically dropping the technical specifications like a hot potato, literally only a few weeks before Christmas and before the beginning of the legislation. So next thing, this is the yellow bar here. So we are now 144 days in since entry into force. And since this was deleted, and since it's not so very clear, and since even a few processed products sneaked into the new legislation from January onwards, everybody who's been doing this, and I have one of the largest smoked fish processors in continental Europe as one of my members. What had they to do? They had to introduce a completely new IT system for their digital lot traceability. So they had to invest a little bit more than 500K into their suppliers and into their own ERP system to make this work. And ERP system is really the place to be when you're working a little bit bigger scale, because there is nobody running behind a fish box and putting a label on a fish box. This is not happening anymore. This is not the 80s anymore. So we really have digital systems already in place, and that's big warehouse systems that need to be adapted to these realities. And the real thing is here interfaces, because we are still talking about data elements being passed on from one to the next. This is happening through interfaces, an API or something like this, or by standards or so. And gosh, we are still lagging behind with this tremendously. And yeah, I have a few conclusions on this in the end. So what's still floating around, actually the bubble should be moved closer to here, because we are literally waiting for this every day now. It should be coming still in the month of June, that there will be some kind of a revision of the delegated act, or another kind of delegated act coming in to specify some of the most urgent things that had to be done. One has to be fair though. Commissar Cardes and the European Commission was putting out some clarification. That was indeed very helpful. That was happening in the end of December or so. There was also maybe something to quote here. Mostly it was saying two things. And the first thing is the question of digital. What means digital? Digital means everything that is not paper-based, including every possible file format and every setup of data elements that you can imagine of. So something that we've been arguing for quite a bit some time, but that was refused, was confirmed then in December by a letter from the European Commission. We are not having big ambitions to digitalization or digital. If you, for example, anybody in the room might know this, when you look at the EU Data Act, for example, for other sectors, there's definitions for a word like interoperability, and there's definitions. Well, this is not happening for fisheries. Fisheries is digital in the way we did this in the 90s. So anything that's not paper is digital enough for us. That was the first. And the second was, that's also a quote from the same letter, it's not supposed to be changing too much. Do continue like you did before, and it's going to be good. So in the sense of one step forward, one step back, for example, providing the information. So that was quite a lot of fuss in the last months before. That was then last minute eliminated. I'm wondering what this updated, revised delegated act is going to be looking like in the next, let's see, days or weeks. And we definitely are in the middle of this red bar here, so we are quite uncertain here. At this point, one has to say, from my reality, Germany also being the biggest trade market in Europe for seafood. So the highest seafood trade volumes are happening in Germany. The traceability is not the big thing. We have a lot more of issues with the imports right now, because the way the import documents are being prepared and handled by the member states is in a similar mess, I would say. And that's causing a lot of need for litigation. Suppliers, customers, custom control authorities, third country suppliers. I don't know if you've read this on the news. The United States are really, really pissed with the way we are dealing in the imports right now. And they're literally saying you can forget about anything Alaska pollock, you can forget about anything wild salmon, all the other fish species that we're getting, for example, sourcing from Alaska. They said, okay, when you don't get your act together, you're not going to get this again to your market, because you're just introducing a significant technical barrier to trade here. This is a little bit Donald Trump words, but it's certainly showing that Europe is in an international context here. And these kind of complicated procedures are scaring away other suppliers, and are certainly not a good trustworthy basis for doing business in an international context. So I'm gonna speed through this here, because it's just adding to the complexity here. What I'm saying is we still don't know what it's going to be looking like for the processed products, and there's still, especially for. Yeah, I'm going to keep that for the end, because I have a theory what might happen, and maybe some lessons learned already from the German market that I'd like to share just as a food for thought. But yes, the big wave is still coming ahead for the processed products in Europe from 29. Oh yeah, and that's also a funny one. At some point in time, maybe in the next 2 years to come, the Common Market Organization, the 1379, is also overdue. That's the piece of EU legislation that is describing what an operator needs to put on the label when you sell the produce to the consumer. So this is mandatory information, for example, fishing gear and FAO capture area. And there it says, today, when you buy a piece of fresh fish from a fishmonger here in the supermarket, the fresh fish in the counter needs to show the species name, the capture area, the way the fish has been caught, gill net, trap nets, or something like this, and what I've forgotten? Yeah, FO area. Yeah. So basically, when it's fresh fish, it needs to reveal itself to the consumer. It says, who am I, where I come from, what kind of fish am I? Species name, apparently, the national commercial denomination species name, but also the Latin species name, importantly. That's not the case for processed products. When you buy a can of fish, mostly you see it's been written on what is in there, but you could just say, yeah, that's fish, deal with it. Could be anything. Today, maybe the one, tomorrow, maybe another species. And my theory would be, yes, that's about to change. But in the same line of thought, that would also be changing for gastronomy, because what a chef is producing or what a server is introducing to you when you go to a restaurant is you're buying a 1604 product because it's a processed, for example, of a barbecue, a grilled dorade with some French fries and a salad. That's a 1604 product. And the same labeling requirements, mandatory consumer information would apply to this. And I say, okay, welcome to big time trouble with food service and gastronomy, because they're going to be up the barricades to have this kind of information basically on the plate of the consumer in the restaurant. This is going to be a big challenge for anything food service and out of home consumption in the European market, especially in the current economic situation. So yeah, I talked about this already quite a lot, so I'm going to be going through this a bit faster and move to the next, let's say, mental chapter. Is it mental? Yeah, it's mental. So control always have their limitations. I was saying this, you cannot control everything. You cannot have a control person sit on the back of every fisherman in the country, even though for boats bigger than 12 meters, we have this now, because every boat bigger than 12 meters needs to have a camera on board right now. And there's literally sitting somebody on the back every single minute out at sea. But yeah, that's a different aspect maybe here. At this point, the limitations of control of what the fisheries control regulation can do is they have no access to non-EU companies. So what's happening outside of Europe, that's not their piece of cake, because that's European legislation. There's also no direct way of introducing sanctions against non-EU companies, apparently because they don't fall under European jurisdiction. And there's also no direct access to foreign EU companies, only when it's happening through cooperation with third country authorities. Don't get me wrong, we do have that quite a lot, yeah? So Europe is not completely acting on its own. We do have international regulatory frameworks that are coming ultimately, for example, from the FAO. We do have agreements with countries, a country like the US, Japan, or South Korea. They would be closing the shoulders with Europe, for example, in the fight against illegal, unreported, and undocumented fisheries. Japan has a very similar IUU system as Europe does. So that's working along, but this is governmental level and on a voluntary basis. More specifically, something like the Port State Measure Agreement, PSMA. Anybody heard about that before? That is for the way internationally by the FAO, it's described how you make sure that especially environmental, but also human rights are respected for people going out at sea, and that institutions, nations have the capacity to control, do fishermen on board of a vessel when they come back to harbor, when they come back to shore, have the possibility to say, okay, I need health care, or I have a problem. This is very fundamental human rights, especially. But this piece of legislation, this is what I'm trying to say here, the fisheries control regulation, is that far ahead of the realities of the world and that far dissociated, so that one can just say, we have a limitation. The domestic market, the European market, is far ahead with the level of controls and requirements. And I can understand every European fisherman and every European fish farmer who would say, I want to have level playing field. I don't have level playing field at this stage. I can totally understand this when they say it. But what we do have, and this is also coming from fall last year, Germany was very good at this. We are very good in writing national laws. We have a catalog of fines for companies in Germany which don't obey. So we know exactly what the fee is that you have to pay when you are putting a wrong, for example, label on a fish box. So we did that. And we have a big focus on national controls. So we do quite know nicely how to control German fishermen. Yeah, we still do have a few, and they are deeply into the control schemes right now. So, but there's a different perspective to this. So yes, of course, controls have their limits. But when we really take a closer, deeper look into the abyss, where should controls be then actually be looking into. This is, I'm going to be using some vague phrasing here. Let's maybe first talk about controversial sustainability indicators. Controversial in this respect as there can be several opinions on this, and there's a limitation as well to the scientific accuracy that you have to attach before you can draw a post-factual conclusion to this. And fishing pressure would be an ideal example from this. Or when we're talking about trawling activities, the impact on seafloor and interspecies, sensitive species. It's a huge debate for good reason, because there's something going on, and this is definitely an impact category for many, many fisheries in the world. But why don't we put a figure on this? Why don't we make an indicator of this and take this along? Yeah, the first is because it's difficult to control. And the second is because it's happening like this elsewhere in the world all the time. And it doesn't make sense when Europe puts their own gold plate on this. Yeah? And then, when we really go deep into the abyss, into the dark side, let's talk about criminal conduct. Let's talk about hidden and disguised IUU, forced labor, organized crime. And I put this in brackets, ultimate beneficial ownership. Anybody heard UBO before, ultimate beneficial ownership? When you talked to experts from environmental NGOs, which is very worthwhile doing in this context, ultimate beneficial ownership is, let's say, the technical term to describe who is benefiting from what you're doing there. When there's criminal or when there's regular conduct, but who's getting the most profit from it in the end? And especially when there's one theory, criminal conduct is mostly done ever when there's intense commercial interest involved in there. Then it's really the question of follow the money. Who is earning with this kind of misconduct? And this is then where, well, typically we would not call control, we would call it enforcement. This is where the police should be going. So a theory that I would, one question I would like to pose is here then, when you are really talking about this, not only controversial, but even to criminal, is this still right to have this within the obligation and within the responsibility of companies? You remember when I was talking about food safety. Food safety is business operators' responsibility. But when something goes wrong, it's authorities and it is crisis plans that come in, because then, for example, health and safety of consumers is at risk. And this turning point of where operators' responsibility stops and legal conduct or the police action kicks in, we're still missing this here in this context in a meaningful way. I think we need that. And because it's mostly understanding where's my limits, what can I still control not. I have a few examples here. This is actually a different context, but we do have various supply chain regulations. CSRD, Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. Biggest change in the last months was some 80% or so of the companies were excluded. It's completely only for big corporate companies. Fun fact, apparently here in this context, retail is all included. And so that means fishing companies are as well included in the sustainability reporting, but also in the DDD, in this due diligence directive requirements, because they are supplying to retail. And so that means they are not watered down. They are just pushed away the way they're handling the responsibility. So we haven't stopped looking at these. It's very important as a fisherman, if I might put it mildly this way, when you as a fisherman are selling your fish to a wholesaler or to an auction, and then to a wholesaler, to a processor, to a retailer, it's a 4 or 5 step supply chain. You are all in, even if you know it or not, to be reporting also on these aspects, criteria, and there's a lot for good reason, because your ultimate customer, big retail, is fully falling under these pieces of EU legislation. And so we haven't even gone beyond the tip of this iceberg at this point, because there is a lot to learn and a lot of data elements also to be passed on, and also data responsibilities to be, let's say at least negotiated in these supply chains. So I said fish stocks or fishing pressure would be a controversial indicator. I was using this slide in Germany. This is here a headline from a German fishing institute. Are fish stocks too positively assessed and calculated? And this is here a big paper. There should be, yeah, let's say there's a certain scientific community that is working on this concept for quite some time now. So stock assessment models are overstating the sustainability of world fisheries in a systematic way. The picture on the right-hand side says it all, to me at least. As long as there's debate, as long as there's dissents, and the scientific debate is not concluded with a final, for example, factual recommendation, and probably never possible to reach this in this context here. As long as that's not concluded, this is going to be controversial, because you ask 2 scientists and you get at least 3 opinions on the state of a fish stock. And when we want to have one indicator, there's always going to be a dissent. STSCF has tried that. The European Commission has tried to introduce a sustainability indicator tool, and it's going to be failing big time in the market, especially in the context of providing false consumer information, because it just remains controversial. And you cannot just simply take the in case of doubt against the subject approach here, because then in the end of the day, there's always criticism to anything here. Maybe something, and I like this piece of work very much. That's also a Nature publication from 2024. That's also a big NGO has been driving this technology forward. On the left-hand side, what you see here is 3 areas of the world, apparently, of coastal areas. So on the coast of Morocco and south of Spain, here on the coast of Norway, and here India, Bangladesh, Myanmar coastline. And just what you see is here, north of Norway, a lot of blue dots. Here in the, I'm missing the name. And the entrance to the Mediterranean Sea, I'm sorry. On the southern side, a lot of red dots. On the northern side, a lot of blue dots. And here, only red dots. And the color difference here is by the technology. They've been using publicly available tracking data from fishing vessels and compared the, like AIS, for example. That's the thing, right? When you're a ship on the sea, you switch on your satellite thingy, and then you're giving your position information to everybody else to just avoid a collision. And then what the authors have been doing here, they've been comparing the publicly available AIS tracking information with microwave satellite information. What is microwave satellites? That's basically a way of satellite imagery that is possible to penetrate clouds. That's very, let's say, robust against weather and stuff. It can just say, there's an object on the water, yes or no. Could be anything. Could be a ship, could be a oil rig or whatever. But they've been apparently using AI to analyze this. And then blue means good match. AIS was showing what we think we've seen with our microwave satellite image, and red means, yeah, that didn't work too well there. Yeah, so there was not so much of an overlap. That does not, by no means, mean that this is all illegal fisheries. It just means that the whole area, and this is a lot of, that's 330,000 fishing vessel detections here in this map alone. They're not on a state of play to say, I want to know what's happening out in the sea. Norway, 100% yes. Of course, every small Norwegian fishing vessel has a computer on board, a satellite tracking device on board, and has at least one person on board that is also capable of handling these technical devices. That's the thing, right? But that's a different piece of cake for anybody working in Myanmar. And we don't even have to go that far. It's just a few 100 kilometers away from the Spanish coastline. And when you see there's mixtures of blue and red in here, and especially the blue ones a little bit further out, you can probably imagine this is European vessels fishing on the coastal waters of Morocco, for example, for sardine. And then the inner vessels are the national ones, Morocco Coastal Fleet, and they just don't have the technical setup to follow on this logic. So this picture here is just saying, yeah, bring the controls out at sea. I would say, yes, do this. But then put every fisherman, thank you very much, in the position that they can actually do this without losing the business. And then I'm just going to go quickly into 2 more, even deeper. This is 2 quotes from a media outlet, documentaries. The first one here that's very worthwhile looking into, Ian Urbina, US Pulitzer Prize winner and journalist for the Outlaw Ocean Project. He brought several series, and this one was about aquaculture. So this is a big shrimp processing facility in the Andhra Pradesh region in the east of India. And they could show and prove that here systematically in this facility, but not only, unfortunately, in this specific facility, people were abducted basically and exploited. That is a case of modern state forced labor. And the tragic case in here, this is why it became also media-wise so big. This went all into the US. So US seafood consumers, US is big in shrimp consumption, big from shrimp from India as well. There's systematic indication that human rights are not respected in Indian shrimp processing facilities to provide US discounters. And this is India. So that's another one. That's coming from the BBC. That's a little bit older. That was aired in 2024, but I think the case took place some years before. And this is Wales. This is happening in Europe. So these are 3 deckhand staff of a fishing vessel. I think it was a scallop trawler in the channel. And I can't remember the nationalities of them, but they were basically let's say, what's that? When you go and one of them were coming from the Philippines, and he went to an agency and said, okay, I'm a fisherman. I want to go for a good paying job. I want to go somewhere safe. I don't want to go somewhere high seas, China, long distance. I want to go to a safe place, earn my living, send money back home to my family. Where should I be going? And the agency said, yeah, go to Europe. That's fine. They have good laws. You go there. And cutting the story short without trying to oversimplify it, these 3 men were tied in the stern room of the boat for weeks in handcuffs until finally somebody in the harbor in Wales recognized there's somebody locked into this vessel and police had to rescue them. So this is not theory, right? So this is happening, and this is, I was giving an example of India, I was giving an example of Europe, and yes, there is criminal misconduct happening in here, and indeed this must be the goal to make this never happen again. I can highly recommend watching these 2 documentaries. That's giving quite a good also impression of control and enforcement possibilities and realities. So maybe I have something more cheerful. Yeah, I'm going to skip that. We heard a bit about sustainability development goals. That's a little bit the concept of shifting success when you look at SDGs. One take home would be, you see this, SDG 1, SDG 8. We are the cause that these are getting worse in other parts of the world by the way that we think we are following our sustainable development goals. That's a presentation itself. I can highly recommend this presentation here, Malik et al. On this. That's indeed also very difficult to digest. We are scoring very well here, life underwater, yay, everything's going up. But human rights, for example, not going so well there because of us. Okay, I would probably have 2 more minutes. Huh? That's easy. Yeah, 10 more slides. That's good. So what else? I talked about the discrepancy we have here in Horeca, hotel, restaurants, catering, and so on a bit. I said earlier on, in the end of the day, it's fish. Huh? It doesn't really matter where it comes from. That's, of course, not very much true. Huh? When you, this is data from the Eurobarometer report. That's 2 years ago now. So they've been looking into what European consumers said when they were asked about their seafood consumption. And then the question was, which of the following information do you think should be mentioned on the label of a, in this case, of a tinned or prepared 1604 product? And I did apparently highlight Germany here. And Germany said 62 did confirm, yeah, I would want to know what species of product is in there. And you can see this question or this answer is green, green, green all the way through. So this is very high percentage of people mentioning and confirming this most frequent mentioned item in many cases. Then next one is also whether the product is wild or farmed. And so a country like Italy, Portugal, it's a second important, 42% of their answers were given this. I want to know if it's wild or farmed. And then the area where it's coming from. What is actually the take here from this? The German market has quite high percentage. I want to know about the environmental impact. I want to know about the fishing gear. And this is much higher than with a lot of other countries. Austria is also high. And I have a theory for why that is. So take home is European consumers do have questions about different seafood products, apparently, also when they're packed, prepared. But it has to do with their experience for these products in the market. And I just brought you some examples from the German market. I found exactly that product in a supermarket here in Portugal yesterday, so that is funny. That's coming from Bremerhaven. So Germany has, 2026 now, for almost 20 years, so some good 18 years now, we have a voluntary labeling system for processed products in the German market for catch area and species on all products. There's only a very few producers, a few brands that don't do this, but for more than 18 years now, we have this on every single product in the German market. You see at least the information, catch area, FAO area, and species on it. Result of, yeah. So that was back then. That was pretty much also around the time when the Marine Stewardship Council was founded. They started in Germany, and so that was, so to say, the culture of controversy and discussions that we had back in the days. I started my PhD in this year, so that was way before I came into play here. And then also important to know, and probably it is connected to this. So Germany started a lot with giving information about where the product comes from, and even on a can of fish, you see what it is. And then I think it's correlated at least to this. Germany is also the country with the highest coverage of certified, especially Marine Stewardship Council and Aquaculture Stewardship Council. Germany is the one globally single most important MSC market in the world. So MSC in Germany is bigger than MSC in France and in the US alone. We have in some categories more than 80% coverage, at least one. In other areas, salmon has been a lot more GGN or Global Gap certified recently. But the most seafood that you get in the German market in this domain here is already certified. And with certification comes also a little bit of training about when you carry a certificate or whatever it says, you need to know what kind of produce you have. So at least you have to where geographic origin and species, and also, from whom have you been buying, and some kind of restriction on, you cannot just buy it from anyone. You cannot just salmon, big thing, right? Spot market of buying salmon doesn't mean either every salmon supplier is certified so that you don't have a barrier to that. That's more or less a reality that you have today. Or you have to limit yourself to those suppliers that fill your specifications. And that's really something that fish wholesale doesn't like. They don't like to be limited on anything here. But when you do it right, I'm just going to skip to this example here because that's most funny. That's not even an actual fisheries product. This would be categorized in chapter, I think it's all where the other rice and pasta stuff is located. So it's certainly not 16. I think it's 15 or 14 or something. But anyways, this product, that's tagliatelle with wild salmon, so it's a pasta dish, will never fall under the traceability requirements of the fisheries control regulation eventually. But still today, you buy the product and you go there. It says the species here, apparently, all kinds of things. But basically, here's a tracking code. When you're, name of the species is in there. It's capture area, fishing gear, certification information is here. Marine Stewardship Council from the Pacifics, right? It says from which production facility it's coming from. Something also that's been asked quite a lot. Where was it produced? We're not making use of that a lot. Huh? We have this EU identification mark, this oval thingy there. Is anybody of you ever looking at this? Yeah, it's too hidden, in my opinion. We could make use of this a lot more. So that's processed here in Bremerhaven as well. This is how I found out about the fish fingers in the Portuguese supermarket, right? Looking at the oval marking here, and it says literally the registration number of the factory in my hometown, Bremerhaven. And fun fact, here on the package under the code is also the name of the person who has been leading the production shift of this thing here. The company here, they're even to the point, they have cameras running when they fill the bags, right? So the moment where the fish pieces and the veggie pieces and the pasta fall into the bag, they take pictures of this for claims of, for example, if something wrong is in the package, if there's a piece of plastic or so, they can literally look on the pictures of the individual package being packed a few months ago to see if there was actually something being introduced there. They have the full CO2 equivalent footprinting thing on every ingredient, not only on fish, but on every, even down to the vegetables and to the spices. And you can look up the price of the product on the website. When you use the code or when you track it, you have the regular retail price in there. And this product has 252 grams CO2e per 100 gram of full finished product. So this is context now. So, and the context here says, technically, when you want, it's possible for any product, doesn't even need to be a finished product. And of course, what I'm trying to say here as well, why the hell do we stop and think we have to stop at fish? Why don't we go for pasta and paprikas and tomatoes and herbs and cream and so on and so forth? And this is apparently what I'm saying. This is level playing field, and this will always be our main take on this. Fish is not as special as anyone might think. It's not, because any of the veggies in here can also have their impact and their footprint and their strings attached. Of course they do, but it's mostly a question of why should one ever want to do this? This is a branded product. The same company, the same factory produces also private label products for the supermarkets, discounters, no name products. They don't have this information there. Why is that? Of course, that's expectation and pricing structure that is driving this. And this is really the question of how much of a regulation do we need, and do we want to harmonize this? Then this is going to have a profound impact on food pricing. Or do we want to live with consumers that want to know for sure, even to the name of the product shift leader? I don't care, but somebody might. Then you go for branded products, and then you pay extra for this. And whoops. Yeah. And this is basically the crossroads where we stand, in my opinion, for traceability to get this solved. And I thank you very much for your attention, and am available for any questions and comments, please.